The champagne glass trembled in Victoria Ashford's manicured hand as she read the text message that would change everything. Table 12. The homeless man in the green jacket. Have fun with your blind date, Vicky. The Grand Sterling restaurant glittered with crystal chandeliers and the soft murmur of New York's elite on that cold February evening. Victoria stood frozen near the mahogany bar, her burgundy dress suddenly feeling too tight, too exposed. At 40 years old, she had built a pharmaceutical empire from nothing, survived a devastating divorce, and earned respect in boardrooms across Manhattan. But right now, in this moment, she felt like the lonely, desperate woman her so-called friends believed her to be. Her phone buzzed again, another message in the group chat she thought was private. OMG, is she actually going to do it? Followed by a string of laughing emojis from Jessica, her college roommate turned socialite. Then Brandon's message, $20 says she walks out in under 2 minutes. Victoria's throat tightened. She could see them now, Jessica, Brandon and Melissa, seated at table 7, partially hidden behind a marble column, but not hidden enough. They were watching, phones ready, probably recording. The same people she'd invited to her Hampton house last summer. The same people she'd helped with connections, loans, and endless favors. She turned slowly toward table 12, and her heart sank into her stomach. He sat alone at the white-clothed table, looking completely out of place in the restaurant's opulent setting. A black man, probably in his mid-50s, wearing a worn green military jacket that had seen better decades. A dark burgundy knit cap covered his head, and a greying beard, thick and unkempt, framed a face deeply lined by time and hardship. His hands, calloused and weathered, rested on the table near a simple glass of water the waiter had reluctantly provided. The contrast was jarring. Around him, couples in designer suits and evening gowns dined on oysters and filet mignon. The soft jazz playing overhead seemed to mock the entire situation. Several diners had already glanced his way with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed disgust. Victoria felt bile rise in her throat. This wasn't just cruel, it was dehumanizing. For her, yes, but more importantly for him. He was a prop in their sick joke, a human being reduced to a punchline. She could leave. Walk out the front door, block their numbers and never speak to them again. Her car was right outside, warm and waiting. She could be home in 20 minutes, pour herself a real drink, and forget this nightmare ever happened. But then what? Let them win. Let them laugh about how the Ice Queen of Manhattan couldn't even handle a simple joke. More than that, leave this man sitting there, aware he'd been used as a tool for someone else's humiliation. Victoria straightened her spine, the same way she did before hostile takeover meetings. She took a deliberate breath, set down her champagne glass, and walked toward table 12. Her heels clicked against the marble floor with purpose. She felt every eye in the restaurant turned toward her, felt the weight of judgment and curiosity pressing down on her shoulders. As she approached, the man looked up. His eyes, deep brown, intelligent, and impossibly sad, met hers. In that moment, Victoria saw something that shattered her expectations completely. Dignity. Despite the torn jacket, despite the beard that needed trimming, despite the obvious markers of homelessness, this man held himself with a quiet grace that commanded respect. "Excuse me," Victoria said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Is this seat taken?" He studied her for a long moment, those wise eyes searching her face. "Ma'am, I think there's been some kind of mistake. I was told—" "No mistake," Victoria interrupted gently, pulling out the chair across from him and sitting down before she could change her mind. "I'm Victoria Ashford." She extended her hand across the table. It hung there in the space between them, her pale, perfectly manicured hand, with its diamond tennis bracelet hovering in front of his rough, work-worn hands. Behind her, she heard a sharp intake of breath from table 7, a stifled giggle, the sound of a phone camera clicking. The man looked at her extended hand, then back at her face. Confusion and something else. Was it hope? Flickering across his features. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and shook her hand. His grip was firm, honest, the handshake of someone who had once known a different life. "Marcus," he said quietly, his voice rough like gravel but steady. "Marcus Thompson." "It's nice to meet you, Marcus." Victoria settled into her chair, placing her clutch purse on the table. Her heart was racing, but her hands remained steady now. She was committed. "I apologize for the confusion. My friends have a terrible sense of humor." Something flickered in Marcus's eyes, understanding perhaps, or pity. "Ma'am, you don't have to do this. I don't know what kind of game this is, but I won't be anyone's joke," Victoria finished for him. "Neither will I." A waiter appeared beside their table, his expression professionally neutral, but his discomfort obvious. "Good evening. Can I get you started with anything?" Victoria didn't hesitate. "Yes." "We'll have a bottle of the 2015 Chateau Margaux, 2 orders of the Atlantic lobster bisque to start, and please bring your menu for the main course." She glanced at Marcus. "Unless you have any dietary restrictions." Marcus stared at her as if she'd spoken in a foreign language. The waiter cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Of course, Miss Ashford. Right away." As the waiter retreated, Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Ma'am, Victoria, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I can't pay for—" "You're my guest," Victoria said firmly, "and please, let's be clear about something. I'm not doing this out of pity or because I'm trying to prove anything to those vultures watching us from across the room. I'm doing this because you and I have both been disrespected tonight, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let them see either of us run away." Marcus sat back, studying her with those penetrating eyes. A slow smile began to form beneath his beard. "You're serious?" "Completely. You know they're recording this whole thing?" "I assumed as much. It'll probably end up on social media by morning." "Then it better be worth watching." For the first time since this nightmare began, Marcus Thompson laughed. It was a real laugh, warm and genuine, the sound of a man who hadn't had much to laugh about in a long time. The sound made something tight in Victoria's chest loosen slightly. The waiter returned with the wine, performing the tasting ritual with barely concealed skepticism. Victoria approved it with a nod, and he poured 2 glasses before disappearing again. Victoria raised her glass. 2 unexpected evenings. Marcus hesitated, then lifted his own glass, his rough hands somehow gentle with the delicate crystal. To dignity. Their glasses touched with a soft clink that seemed to echo in the space around them. As Victoria sipped the wine, $300 a bottle, she thought absurdly, she caught sight of Jessica's face across the restaurant. Her former friend's expression had shifted from gleeful anticipation to confused frustration. Good, Victoria thought. Let them be confused. Let them wonder what happens next. Because, truthfully, Victoria had no idea what she was doing. She only knew that this moment, this connection with a complete stranger, felt more real than any interaction she'd had in months. Maybe years. "So," Marcus said after a moment, setting down his wineglass with care, "are you going to tell me what this is really about, or do I have to guess?" Victoria looked into those intelligent, weathered eyes and made a decision. "How long do you have?" "Lady, I've got nothing but time." And so, as the February wind howled against the windows of the grand Sterling restaurant, as expensive dinners cooled on china plates around them, and as phones captured every moment from the shadows, Victoria Ashford began to talk. Not about the joke, not about the humiliation, but about something deeper, about loneliness at the top, about success that felt hollow, about a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt empty within. And Marcus Thompson, homeless veteran with calloused hands and a green jacket that had seen combat in Iraq, listened, really listened. In a way no one had listened to Victoria in years. Neither of them noticed when the soup arrived, steam rising from the bowls like ghosts of the past. The lobster bisque sat untouched between them as Marcus Thompson's weathered hands wrapped around the wine glass, his eyes distant, seeing something beyond the crystal chandeliers and marble columns of the Grand Sterling restaurant. "You want to know the funny thing about being invisible?" Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of years. "People think you became homeless overnight. Like you just woke up one day and decided to live on the streets." Victoria leaned forward, the background noise of the restaurant fading away. Across the room, she could see Jessica's table, their phones still pointing, their expressions confused and frustrated. Let them watch. "I was an engineer," Marcus continued, a bitter smile crossing his face. "Structural engineer, Columbia University, class of 1992. I designed buildings, bridges, things that were supposed to last forever." He paused, taking a small sip of wine. "Funny how nothing lasts forever, isn't it?" The waiter appeared to refill their water glasses, his movements quick and uncomfortable. Marcus waited until he left before continuing. "I did 2 tours in Iraq, Army Corps of Engineers. We rebuilt schools, hospitals, infrastructure. I thought I was making a difference." His jaw tightened. "Came back in 2008, right when the economy collapsed. My firm went under. Lost my job, then my house, then my wife. She couldn't handle what I'd become. The nightmares, the anger, the man who came back instead of the one who left." Victoria's throat tightened. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." Marcus met her eyes directly. "I made choices, some good, some terrible. Started drinking to silence the screams in my head. Lost custody of my daughter. That's when I really lost everything. The day Emily looked at me with fear instead of love." The raw honesty in his voice cut through every social barrier Victoria had ever built. This wasn't small talk or networking. This was truth, stripped bare and bleeding. "How long have you been on the streets?" she asked softly. 6 years. 3 months, 14 days. Marcus said it without hesitation, as if he'd been counting every single one. "I've applied for over 200 jobs. Did you know that's nearly impossible without an address? Or when your clothes smell like the shelter, no matter how many times you wash them in public bathrooms?" He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a battered envelope, creased and worn from being carried everywhere. From it, he extracted a photograph, its edges soft with handling. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, grinning at the camera with missing front teeth and braided hair. Emily. She's 13 now. "I haven't seen her in 2 years. Marcus's voice cracked slightly. "Her mother remarried. A good man, stable, everything I'm not. I watch her sometimes from across the street when she leaves for school, just to make sure she's okay." Victoria felt tears burning behind her eyes. "Marcus." "You want to know why I came here tonight?" Marcus interrupted, carefully returning the photo to its envelope. "A man came up to me 3 hours ago, well-dressed, smiling. Said he'd give me $200 to show up here at 8 o'clock, sit at table 12, and wait for a business associate." I knew it was wrong. Felt it in my gut. "But $200? He laughed bitterly. "That's a month of meals. That's new boots before winter gets worse. That's maybe, just maybe, enough to rent a motel room and take a shower before a job interview." The realization hit Victoria like a physical blow. Brandon. It had to be Brandon. He'd set this up, paid Marcus to be here, turned a human being's desperation into entertainment. "I'm going to find who did this," Victoria said, her voice hard as steel. "And I'm going to make them regret." "No!" Marcus held up his hand. "You don't understand. I took the money, knowing something was off. I made that choice. What matters now is what happens next. He pulled something else from his jacket, a folded piece of paper, official-looking even in its worn state. He smoothed it on the table between them. This is a letter from Cornerstone Development. You know them? Victoria's heart skipped. Cornerstone was one of the largest construction firms in New York. Of course. They're rebuilding the Williamsburg Bridge access ramps, major structural project. They need someone who understands old infrastructure, someone who can work with the original 1903 design specifications. Marcus's eyes held hers. I wrote them a letter 3 weeks ago. Explained my situation, my experience, attached my portfolio from before. I never expected to hear back. He turned the letter toward her. Victoria read it, her eyes widening with each line. They want to interview you, she whispered. Next Monday, 9 a.m. Marcus's voice trembled slightly. But I can't show up like this. I need decent clothes, a haircut, somewhere to stay the night before so I don't smell like the shelter. I need to print copies of my credentials, my designs, my references from before everything fell apart. He looked down at his hands, those capable hands that had built schools in war zones and designed bridges in peacetime. That $200? It might just save my life, and I hate that. I hate that I was desperate enough to be someone's joke. But I can't hate it too much, because it might be the thing that brings me back. Victoria's mind raced. The vulnerability, the raw honesty, the sheer courage it took for this man to keep fighting after everything had been stripped away. It shattered something inside her that had been frozen for years. What if, Victoria said slowly, an idea forming. What if tonight wasn't about being anyone's joke? What if we turned this into something else entirely? Marcus studied her carefully. I'm listening. I own a building in Midtown, Ashford Pharmaceuticals. We have executive suites on the top floor with private bathrooms, closets full of suits from photo shoots and corporate events. She pulled out her phone, fingers moving rapidly. My driver is outside. He can take you there tonight. You can shower, shave, sleep in a real bed. Tomorrow my assistant will take you to get whatever you need. Clothes, haircut, documents printed. Marcus was shaking his head before she finished. I can't accept... This isn't charity, Victoria interrupted firmly. This is an investment. You're an engineer with 20 years of experience who's about to interview for a major project. I'm a businesswoman who believes in backing the right people. She leaned forward. But more than that, Marcus, I'm someone who's tired of watching good people fall through the cracks while people like my former friends treat human beings like entertainment. She picked up her wine glass, her eyes fierce. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to finish this meal. We're going to laugh and talk like two people getting to know each other. We're going to give them a show worth recording. And then you're going to ace that interview Monday and land that job. Marcus's eyes glistened. Why? Why would you do this? Victoria thought about her empty penthouse, her hollow victories, her so-called friends who had orchestrated this cruel joke. She thought about being 40 and successful and absolutely, crushingly lonely. Because 6 months ago, I stood on my balcony and thought about jumping, she said quietly, the words coming from somewhere deep and true. Because success without purpose is just expensive emptiness. Because maybe we're both here tonight for a reason that has nothing to do with their joke and everything to do with reminding each other that dignity isn't something you lose when you lose everything else. It's something you choose to keep. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath around them. Even the jazz had quieted to a whisper. Marcus reached across the table and took Victoria's hand in both of his. His grip was strong, grounding, real. Thank you, he said simply. And in that moment, with phones recording from the shadows and crystal chandeliers glittering overhead, two broken people found something neither had expected: hope. The main course arrived with theatrical precision: pan-seared duck breast for Victoria, prime ribeye for Marcus, but neither of them noticed the food. They were too busy talking, really talking, in a way that felt like opening windows in a house that had been sealed shut for years. Marcus told her about designing a school in Fallujah that still stood despite 2 bombings. Victoria shared how she'd started her pharmaceutical company in a garage, working 18-hour days, while her ex-husband told her she was wasting her time. They talked about Emily, about regret, about second chances that seemed impossible until they weren't. "You're actually smiling," Marcus observed, his own face transformed by the warmth in his eyes. "First genuine smile I've seen all night." Victoria touched her face, surprised. "I haven't had a real conversation in months, maybe years." She glanced toward table 7, where Jessica, Brandon and Melissa were conferring in urgent whispers. "Everyone in my life either wants something from me or wants to tear me down." "Then they're not your life," Marcus said simply. "They're just people taking up space in it." Before Victoria could respond, she saw Brandon stand up from his table. He was adjusting his tie, that smug smile plastered across his face, the same smile he wore when closing a bad deal or spreading gossip at the country club. "Here we go," Victoria muttered. Brandon approached their table with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. His cologne arrived before he did, expensive and overpowering. Behind him, Jessica had her phone raised, recording. "Vicky," Brandon said loudly, drawing attention from nearby tables. "Having a nice evening. I have to say, you're really committing to this whole charity date thing. Very noble of you." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, his dignity intact, even as Brandon's words tried to strip it away. Victoria set down her fork with deliberate care. When she looked up at Brandon, her eyes were ice. "Brandon, I wondered when you'd slither over here." His smile faltered slightly. "Oh, come on, it's just a joke. Don't tell me you're actually—" "Do you know what's funny, Brandon?" Victoria interrupted, her voice carrying across the restaurant. Other diners were turning now, sensing drama. "6 months ago, when you begged me to invest in your hedge fund, I said yes. $200,000. Remember that?" Brandon's face reddened. We're not talking about—" "And Jessica," Victoria continued, her gaze shifting to her former friend, who had lowered her phone slightly. "When your husband found out about your affair last year, who did you call crying at 3 in the morning? Who let you stay in her guest house for 2 weeks while you worked things out?" Jessica's face went pale. Victoria stood up slowly, her burgundy dress catching the chandelier light. She was magnificent in her anger, controlled, powerful, devastating. "And Melissa, sweet Melissa, when your son got arrested for his 3rd DUI, who made a phone call to ensure he got into rehab instead of jail? Who paid for that rehab?" The restaurant had gone completely silent. Even the jazz had stopped. Everyone was watching now, not with amusement, but with rapt attention. "You 3 thought it would be hilarious to humiliate me," Victoria said, her voice steady and clear. "You paid this man, a veteran, an engineer, a father, to be a prop in your cruel joke. You reduced both of us to entertainment for your shallow, empty lives." Brandon tried to recover. "Look, we were just trying to help you lighten up. You've been so serious lately. Help me." Victoria's laugh was sharp. "You wanted to watch me squirm. You wanted to record my discomfort and share it with your equally vapid friends. You wanted to remind me that despite my success, despite everything I've built, you still see me as someone beneath you, someone lonely enough to mock." She took a step closer to Brandon, who actually backed up slightly. "But here's what you didn't expect. You didn't expect me to sit down. You didn't expect me to have a real conversation with a real human being. You didn't expect that in your attempt to humiliate both of us, you'd actually give me the most honest, meaningful evening I've had in years. Marcus stood up beside her, his presence solid and grounding. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, the one with Brandon's $200. I believe this belongs to you, Marcus said quietly, holding it out to Brandon. I don't want money that comes from treating people like jokes. Brandon stared at the envelope as if it were a snake. You can keep it. It's fine. I insist, Marcus said, his voice firmer now. He placed the envelope on Brandon's chest, forcing him to take it or let it fall. Brandon grabbed it awkwardly, his face now completely red. Victoria pulled out her phone, opening her banking app with a few swift taps. Marcus, what's your phone number? He gave it to her, confusion crossing his face. Victoria typed rapidly, then showed him her screen. Check your phone. Marcus pulled out a battered flip phone from his pocket. When he opened it, his eyes widened. Victoria, this is $20,000, Victoria said clearly, making sure everyone nearby heard. Consider it a consulting fee. I'm hiring you as an independent consultant for my company's new research facility project. Your expertise in structural engineering will be invaluable. You can't just... Brandon sputtered. I just did, Victoria cut him off. She turned to face the entire restaurant, her voice projecting with the confidence of someone who'd given countless presentations to hostile boards. Let me tell you all what just happened here tonight. These three people tried to orchestrate humiliation. Instead, they facilitated connection. They thought they were exposing loneliness. Instead, they revealed their own moral bankruptcy. She gestured to Marcus. This man served his country, built infrastructure that saves lives, and despite losing everything, still has more dignity in his worn jacket than they have in all their designer clothes combined. Victoria picked up her wineglass, raised it high. So here's to unexpected evenings. Here's to people who judge character by actions rather than appearances. And here's to the fact that every person in this restaurant who recorded this scene tonight witnessed not a joke, but a reminder that humanity and dignity can't be bought or sold. They can only be chosen. Several diners began to clap. It started slowly, then built into genuine applause. An elderly woman at a nearby table stood up, raising her own glass. Others joined her. Jessica was crying now, mascara running down her face. Melissa had her hand over her mouth, looking genuinely ashamed. Brandon just stood there, frozen, the envelope of money hanging limply in his hand. "We're done here," Victoria said to him, her voice dropping back to normal volume but somehow more cutting for it. "Lose my number. All of you." She turned to Marcus, whose eyes were suspiciously bright. "Ready to get out of here?" "More than ready," he said quietly. Victoria signaled for the check, which the maitre d' brought over immediately with an apologetic bow. "Ms. Ashford, your meal is complimentary this evening. It's been an honor to witness this." As they walked toward the exit, Marcus leaned close to Victoria. "Did you really just give me $20,000? "I really did. And Monday morning, after your interview, we're meeting to discuss the actual consulting job. Because I meant every word. I'm building a new research facility, and I need someone who understands structural integrity in older buildings." They stepped out into the February night, the cold air a shock after the restaurant's warmth. Victoria's driver immediately opened the car door. Before they got in, Marcus turned to her. "Why? Really why?" Victoria looked back at the restaurant, at the windows glowing with warm light, at the life she was walking away from. "Because sometimes the universe sends you exactly what you need, disguised as something else entirely," she said softly. "They meant to break us both. Instead, they reminded me what it feels like to be human. 3 months later, the morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ashford Pharmaceuticals' executive conference room. Victoria stood at the head of the table, watching as Marcus Thompson, clean-shaven, wearing a crisp charcoal suit and carrying a leather portfolio, presented structural plans to her board of directors. "As you can see here," Marcus explained, pointing to the architectural renderings on the screen, "by reinforcing the existing foundation and integrating modern seismic supports with the 1920s infrastructure, we can preserve the building's historical integrity while meeting current safety standards. The projected cost savings compared to demolition and rebuild is approximately 40%. The board members nodded, impressed. Marcus had that quality. When he spoke about engineering, his passion and expertise shone through every word. This was the man he'd always been, Victoria realized, just buried under circumstances that had tried to destroy him. The presentation ended to genuine applause. As the board members filed out, discussing the proposal enthusiastically, Marcus gathered his materials with hands that no longer shook from cold or hunger. "You were brilliant," Victoria said once they were alone. Marcus smiled. The transformation in his face still caught her off guard sometimes. The haunted look was gone, replaced by something lighter, hopeful. "I had a good teacher. You taught me how to present to hostile audiences." "That board wasn't hostile." "No," Marcus agreed, "but 3 months ago I thought every room was hostile. You taught me to see the difference." Victoria walked to the window, looking out over Manhattan. So much had changed since that February night. The video from the restaurant had indeed gone viral, but not the way Brandon had intended. The internet had embraced their story, turning it into a phenomenon about dignity, second chances, and standing up to cruelty. Brandon had lost 3 major clients. Jessica's husband had finally filed for divorce. Melissa had quietly disappeared from social media entirely. "I got an email this morning," Marcus said softly, joining her at the window. "From Emily." Victoria turned sharply. "Your daughter?" He nodded, pulling out his phone, a new smartphone, not the battered flip phone from before. He showed her the message, and Victoria felt tears spring to her eyes as she read it. "Dad, Mom showed me the video. I saw what you did, how you handled everything. I saw the news articles about your new job. I'm proud of you. Can we have coffee? I want to hear your voice again. I miss you. Love, Emily." "Marcus," Victoria whispered, her hand covering her mouth. "I'm seeing her Saturday," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "At the cafe near her school. Just coffee, just talking. But it's a start." Victoria hugged him then. This man who had become so much more than a consultant or a project. He'd become a friend, a reminder that success meant nothing if you couldn't look yourself in the mirror. "There's something else," Marcus said as they separated. He reached into his portfolio and pulled out an envelope, official and formal. "The Williamsburg Bridge project, I got it. They want me as lead structural engineer. It's a 3-year contract." "Marcus, that's incredible." "There's more." His eyes were bright with emotion. "I found an apartment. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. 1 bedroom in Brooklyn near Prospect Park. I moved in last week. I have a home again, Victoria. A real home." The weight of those words hung in the air between them. From homeless to employed, from invisible to essential, from separated from his daughter to having coffee on Saturday. The transformation was complete, but Victoria knew it had started long before she'd walked into that restaurant. It had started with Marcus refusing to give up, refusing to let circumstances define his worth. "I need to tell you something," Victoria said, turning back to the window. "That night at the restaurant, I wasn't exaggerating when I said I'd stood on my balcony thinking about jumping. I was so tired, Marcus. Tired of being alone, tired of success that felt empty, tired of people who only wanted something from me." She felt his hand on her shoulder, steady and grounding. You saved my life too, she continued, not with money or opportunities, but by reminding me what real connection feels like. By showing me that dignity isn't about what you have, it's about who you choose to be when everything is taken away. We saved each other, Marcus said simply. A knock on the conference room door interrupted them. Victoria's assistant Margaret poked her head in, her expression apologetic. "Ms. Ashford, there's someone here to see you. She says it's important." "I'm in a meeting. She says her name is Emily Thompson." Victoria and Marcus exchanged shocked glances. Emily wasn't supposed to be here. Their coffee date was Saturday, still 3 days away. "Send her in," Victoria said, her heart racing. A young girl stepped into the conference room, 13 years old, with her father's intelligent eyes and her mother's graceful features. She wore a school uniform and carried a backpack covered in colourful patches. She stopped when she saw Marcus, her breath catching. "Dad," she whispered. Marcus couldn't speak. He just stood there, frozen, as if moving might shatter the moment. Emily walked forward slowly, tears streaming down her face. "I couldn't wait until Saturday. I tried, but I needed to see you, to make sure you were real, to make sure this was all real." "Emily," Marcus managed, his voice rough with emotion. "Sweetheart, She ran to him then, throwing her arms around him in a fierce hug. Marcus held his daughter for the first time in 2 years, and Victoria had to turn away, her own tears falling freely. "I'm so sorry." Emily sobbed into her father's chest. "I was scared and confused, and I believed what everyone said about you giving up, but you never gave up, did you? You never stopped fighting." "Never," Marcus whispered into her hair. "Not for a single day. You were my reason to keep going." Victoria slipped quietly toward the door, giving them privacy, but Emily's voice stopped her. "Wait," the girl said, pulling back from her father but keeping one hand gripped in his. She looked at Victoria with eyes full of gratitude. "You're her. You're the woman from the restaurant, the one who saw my dad when everyone else looked through him." Victoria nodded, not trusting her voice. Emily crossed the room and hugged her too, this stranger girl who somehow felt familiar. "Thank you," Emily said fiercely. "Thank you for giving me my father back." "He was never lost," Victoria said gently, smoothing the girl's braids. "Just waiting to be found." Later, after Emily had left, promising to see Marcus Saturday and every weekend after, Victoria and Marcus stood alone in the conference room once more. The sun had shifted, casting long golden shadows across the polished table. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. Victoria smiled, a real smile, the kind she'd forgotten she could make. "Now you rebuild bridges, literal ones across the city and metaphorical ones with your daughter. You create a life worth living. And you?" "I do the same." She looked around her office, at the empire she'd built, at the success that had once felt so empty. "I'm starting a foundation, the Second Chance Initiative. We'll help veterans, people experiencing homelessness, anyone who needs a bridge back to the life they lost." Marcus's eyes widened. "Victoria." "And I'm hiring a co-director," she continued. "Someone who understands what it's like to fall through the cracks. Someone who knows that dignity isn't given. It's chosen. Someone who can help others find their way back." She extended her hand formally. "Interested?" Marcus took her hand, but instead of shaking it, he held it gently. "You know what the craziest part of this whole thing is?" "What?" They thought they were setting up a joke. Brandon, Jessica, Melissa, they thought they were orchestrating humiliation. He laughed, the sound full of wonder. "But they actually set up the most important blind date of my life, not romantic, but real. The kind that changes everything." Victoria squeezed his hand. "To unexpected beginnings and second chances." Marcus added. Through the window, Manhattan stretched out before them. Millions of stories, millions of struggles, millions of chances for connection, if people would just look at each other, really look, and see the dignity that existed in every human being regardless of their circumstances. That February night had started as a cruel joke, but it had become something else entirely, a reminder that sometimes the universe works in mysterious ways, that redemption is always possible, and that the most meaningful connections often come from the most unexpected places. Victoria's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I saw your interview about the Second Chance Initiative. I'm a single mother who lost everything in a fire. Is there really help for people like me? She showed the message to Marcus. He smiled, that warm smile that transformed his entire face. There is now, he said. And together they began to type a response. Two people who'd been broken and rebuilt, ready to help others find their way home. Outside, the city hummed with life, full of people who were lonely, struggling, invisible, all waiting for someone to really see them, to remind them that dignity could never be taken, only forgotten, and then, with courage and connection, remembered again. The end.